Most people think discipline comes from motivation, but the Japanese monks of the Tendai Mountains discovered something far more powerful, a system so intense that the human mind has no room left for laziness. It's called the Zero Excuses system, a method that monks practiced for over 1,000 years, a method that crushed fear, silence, procrastination, and self-pity until only pure action remained. But before I teach you this system, I want you to imagine something. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that everything you failed to do in your life was not because you were weak, but because excuses had more power over you than truth. Imagine sitting on the edge of your bed, the world still quiet, your mind still soft from sleep, and for the first time, you feel the weight of all the moments where you chose comfort over growth, where you said later, knowing deep inside you meant never. Imagine realizing that excuses were never harmless. They were thieves, silent ones. They stole your time, your confidence, your identity, and you didn't even notice them entering your life. Imagine looking back at the last 5 years and seeing not failures, but abandoned attempts, unfinished beginnings, dreams you talked about, but never walked towards. And imagine this thought hitting you like lightning. If I keep living this way, I will become someone I no longer respect. That is the moment every disciplined person is born, not in a gym, not in a temple, but in that small, private war where you finally confront the truth. Your excuses have been running your life. Today, we take that power back. But first, subscribe to Discipline Dojo and tell me in the comments, what's the excuse that has held me back the longest? Your answer may become the next video. Chapter 1. The Man Who Could Never Start. His name was Daigo. Not the monk, not the master, but the broken version of the man he would one day become. Daigo was 27, smart, capable, full of ideas. But every night he slept with the same shame burning in his chest. I could have done more today. He wasn't lazy. He was afraid. Afraid of starting and failing. Afraid of discomfort. Afraid that he would try, and the world would still call him not enough. What people never understood about Daigo was that he didn't lack ambition. He lacked momentum. He was the kind of man who filled notebooks with plans, watched videos on productivity, set alarms for early mornings, only to wake up and feel that familiar heaviness pull him back into bed. He would stand in front of the mirror some days, looking at the tired version of himself, whispering, "Maybe tomorrow will be different." But tomorrow was just another room that looked exactly like the one before it. He told himself the same things you and I have said. I'll start tomorrow. I'm not in the mood. I'll do it when I feel ready. Life is too stressful right now. It's not my fault. His life was a collection of postponed beginnings. Fitness he planned to start, books he meant to read, skills he wanted to learn, projects he promised he'd complete when things calmed down. But things never calmed down because the chaos wasn't around him. It was inside him. One evening, Daigo's father visited his tiny apartment. The place was a mess. Dirty dishes, unpaid bills, dreams lying around like broken tools. His father walked slowly, quietly taking in the room, seeing the son he loved trapped in a life that was shrinking around him. He said only one sentence: "A man's excuses become his cage." And Daigo felt it. He felt every word strike him with the force of a truth he had avoided for years. The door of that cage had been closed for years, and every excuse was another lock. He had built that cage himself, one postponement at a time, one "not today" at a time, one lie whispered to avoid discomfort. That night, unable to breathe under the weight of his own avoidance, Daigo finally broke. He sat on the floor, hands in his hair, heart pounding, as a terrifying realization washed over him. If I don't change now, I never will. And so, with nothing left to lose, Daigo made a decision that would change everything. He climbed the mountain of Hiei, seeking the monks who were rumored to possess an inhuman level of discipline. He didn't know what he was walking into. He didn't know what he would become. But he knew one thing. He could not live one more day inside the cage he had built. Chapter 2. The monker who never accepted excuses. Daigo expected kindness. He expected spiritual smiles. He expected soft voices and gentle encouragement. He imagined a peaceful sanctuary where monks walked slowly, where incense smoke curled softly in the air, where wisdom came wrapped in comforting metaphors. But the monk who opened the temple door, Master Sogen, had eyes like carved stone. They were not cruel, but they were mercilessly honest, the kind of eyes that had seen thousands of men come with big desires and break under small discomforts. "What do you seek?" he asked. Daigo's voice trembled, not from fear of the man, but from fear of admitting the truth out loud. "I want discipline," Daigo whispered. "I want to stop wasting my life." Sogen didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply stared, as if peeling away every excuse, every lie, every justification Daigo had ever told himself. Sogen studied him, as if reading each lie he had ever told himself. Then he spoke with the calmness of a man who had repeated this teaching to countless lost souls. "Then you must accept the rule of this temple," the monk said. "There are no excuses here." Daigo blinked. The air suddenly felt heavier, as if the mountain itself had leaned closer to listen. "None?" Daigo asked. "None," Sogen repeated. "What if I'm tired? No excuses. What if I'm sick? No excuses. What if I fail? Then you begin again. Without excuses." The words struck him like stones. The simplicity of them was terrifying. Excuses had always been his safety net, his way of softening the pain of falling short. Without them, he felt naked. Daigo felt panic rise in him. "But I'm just a normal person." He said it softly, as if hoping Sogen would soften too, would acknowledge his humanity, would give him even a small allowance. Instead, Sogen stepped closer. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet. The cold mountain air drifted between them, and Sogen's voice cut through Daigo's trembling thoughts. "That is your mind talking, not your truth." Then he said the sentence that broke Daigo open. "You do not lack discipline. You are addicted to avoiding discomfort." In that moment, every excuse Daigo had ever spoken echoed inside him at once. He remembered the mornings he postponed, the nights he wasted, the plans he abandoned, the promises he let dissolve the moment they required effort. All of them whispered the same thing: avoid pain, avoid discomfort, avoid effort. And in that moment, Daigo knew the monk was right. His problem wasn't weakness, it was worshipping comfort. And this temple, this mountain, this monk was about to rip that comfort out of him. Chapter 3. The first test, the bowl of water. The monks gave Daigo his first task. Simple. Stupidly simple. Every morning before sunrise, not after sunrise, not when he felt like it, he had to carry a bowl of water from one end of the courtyard to the other without spilling a single drop. That's it. And that was exactly why it terrified him. Daigo expected training that felt dramatic, endurance trials, meditation marathons, something that looked like the discipline he had seen in movies. Instead, he was handed a bowl a small wooden bowl filled to the very edge, so full that even the slightest tremble would ripple the surface. The courtyard was large, exposed to the cold mountain wind, lined with old cedar trees that whispered softly at dawn. The stones beneath his feet were uneven, forcing him to step with care. Daigo didn't understand. What does this teach me? It's too easy. Master Sogen shook his head slowly, as if Daigo had missed the most important truth in the world. Your enemy is not difficulty. Your enemy is inconsistency. Daigo swallowed. He didn't want to admit it, but the words hit too close. Day 1. Daigo overslept. Excuse. My body needed rest. He remembered the warmth of his blanket, the soft reasoning he whispered to himself. You'll do it properly tomorrow. Tomorrow, the favorite hiding place of people who fear effort. Day 2. He spilled water because he rushed. Excuse. It's cold outside. His fingers were numb, the morning wind unforgiving, so he convinced himself speed was necessary, and in that rush, the water trembled and spilled. Day 3. It rained. He skipped the task. Excuse. It's not my fault. He stood under the wooden roof of the hallway, watching raindrops strike the stone, feeling almost proud of his reasoning, as if avoiding discomfort was wisdom, not weakness. On day 4, Sogen said, You have already failed, but not because you couldn't carry the bowl. You failed because you obeyed the voice that gives you excuses. His voice was calm, not angry, not disappointed, just brutally truthful. Daigo didn't spill the water. He drowned in his own justifications. It was the first time he understood. The bowl wasn't the test. The weather wasn't the obstacle. The task wasn't difficult. The fight was between him and the voice inside his mind that always negotiated, always postponed, always explained away his lack of action. That bowl of water exposed something deeper. Daigo wasn't struggling with the task. He was struggling with himself, and the mountain had only begun to break him. Chapter 4. The Zero Excuses Ceremony. One evening, Sogen took Daigo deep into the forest to a small wooden hall used for a single ritual. The path was narrow and dark, lit only by moonlight seeping through the tall cedar trees. The air grew colder with every step, and Daigo sensed that he was being led somewhere that few ever entered. Sogen walked ahead without speaking, his steps silent, steady, unfaltering, as if he had made this walk 1,000 times. When they reached the hall, Daigo felt a strange pull in his chest. The building was old, not abandoned, but untouched by anything unnecessary. The wooden beams were smooth from time, the floor polished by countless bare feet, the walls adorned with nothing but emptiness. It felt like a place where the truth had nowhere to hide. The Zero Excuses Ceremony. The place was scented. A single candle burned. The air felt heavy, sacred. Daigo noticed the thin stream of smoke rising from the candle, as if even the flame was holding its breath. His own heartbeat seemed too loud for the room. Sogen placed a scroll in Daigo's hands. Write every excuse you have used in your life. Daigo's fingers trembled. He knelt before a low wooden table, unrolled the scroll, and dipped the brush into ink. The first words came easily. I'm tired. I'm stressed. But then the deeper ones poured out of him, the excuses that had shaped his identity more than he realized. I'll start tomorrow. It's not the right time. It's too hard. I don't feel motivated. It's not my fault. I'm not ready. The list felt endless. Memories surfaced. Times he had disappointed himself. Times he had avoided opportunities. Times he had walked away from discomfort and called it reason. Each excuse he wrote felt like peeling away a layer of his old self, revealing something raw, unprotected, and painfully honest. Sogen then said, "Now write the cost." Daigo hesitated. His eyes burned. His chest tightened. He suddenly understood why this ceremony was feared even among monks. "The cost of your excuses is the life you could have lived." He felt the truth cut him open. He wrote nothing for several moments, because the cost was everything, every unlived dream, every abandoned goal, every moment he chose comfort over becoming the man he could have been. Then Sogen burned the scroll. As the paper curled into ash, the monk whispered, "We do not defeat excuses. We outgrow the person who needed them." And as the ash drifted upward in the candlelight, Daigo felt as if a funeral had just taken place. The funeral of his old self. Chapter 5. The day his identity broke. Daigo realized something painful. He wasn't fighting laziness. He was fighting a version of himself who had survived through avoidance. For years, avoidance had been his armor. It protected him from trying, because trying meant exposing himself to the possibility of failure. Discomfort felt like danger. Effort felt like risk. Trying felt like vulnerability. And so his mind built a false version of him, a quieter, smaller Daigo, who lived behind excuses and delays because it was easier than facing truth. The excuses were not barriers. They were comfort. They felt familiar, like a warm blanket wrapped around every fear he never confronted. They protected him from fear, from shame, from failure, but they also protected him from transformation. Every time Daigo had said, "I'll do it later," he wasn't postponing a task. He was postponing the person he could become. Every time he said, "I'm too tired," he wasn't describing his energy. He was describing his identity. Every excuse he had spoken was a thread woven into the fabric of who he thought he was. But Sogen said, "Excuses are comfortable lies we tell ourselves when the truth is too heavy to hold." In that moment, those words hit him harder than any punishment, any physical challenge, any discipline drill ever could. Daigo realized he had lived his entire life defending a weak identity. Not a bad identity, not an evil one, just a fragile one. One built on protecting himself instead of growing himself. It was the identity of a man who avoided responsibility because responsibility exposed him. The identity of someone who pretended he was waiting for the right moment, when in truth, he was hiding from the moment he feared most, the moment he met his potential. Daigo suddenly saw the version of himself he had been carrying his entire life, a shadow self, built from hesitation and fear, held together by excuses, and he was finally ready to bury it, not with anger, not with shame, but with acceptance, because to become the man he wanted to be, the man of discipline, the man of action, the man of truth, the weaker version of Daigo had to die. Chapter 6. The Zero Excuses System. Sogen finally revealed the system. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't speak dramatically. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who had lived these principles so deeply that they had carved themselves into his bones. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of the temple banners in the wind. Daigo leaned forward, sensing that this, not the bowl, not the ceremony, not the rituals, was the moment his life would radically change. Stage 1. The immediate act. If task is thought, task begins. No gap between intention and action. It was the purest form of discipline. The monks lived by it every single day. If a monk thought of sweeping the floor, the broom was already in his hand. If a monk thought of training, his feet were already moving toward the courtyard. They did not wait to feel ready. They did not ask themselves if they were motivated, inspired, or comfortable. To them, action wasn't something you prepared for. It was something you became. Monks say, action before emotion, movement before mood. Daigo realized this was where he had always failed. He paused. He hesitated. He negotiated with his own mind. And in that negotiation, his excuses always won. Stage 2. The ritual of completion. Every task that begins must end. No half-action, no abandoned attempts. Sogen explained, starting is easy for most people. Finishing is where they break. Monks believed that every unfinished task left a crack inside the mind. A place where doubt multiplied. A place where excuses took root. If a monk began a task, he completed it whether he was tired, bored, frustrated, or uncomfortable. A half-finished task was considered a half-finished self. Daigo remembered all the things he had abandoned. Books he never finished, workouts he cut short, projects he stopped halfway, promises he never fulfilled. He suddenly understood. His identity was built from incomplete cycles. Stage 3. The return to stillness. When excuses rise, breathe once. Return to task. No debate, no negotiation. Sogen's voice sharpened. The moment you allow your mind to argue with action, you have already lost. The monks did not fight their excuses. They did not wrestle with them. They did not analyze or justify them. They simply returned to the task. One breath, one step, one motion. Excuses were treated like clouds, not enemies, not monsters, just passing illusions. Thinking is the birthplace of excuses, Sogen said. Move before the mind corrupts the moment. Daigo felt these words in his bones. For the first time, he saw discipline not as a battle with motivation, but as freedom from negotiation. This was the zero excuses system, pure, simple, unyielding, and it was about to remake him completely. Chapter 7. The Transformation. Daigo began applying the system. Wake up. Immediately stand. Task appears. Immediately start. Doubt comes. Breathe. Act. Discomfort rises. Stay. At first it felt unnatural, like trying to write with the wrong hand. His mind kept reaching for old habits, old excuses, old patterns of delay. But every time the familiar voice whispered, "You can do it later," Daigo caught it, mid-sentence, and shut it down with movement. Each action became a rebellion. Each completed task, a small victory. Each moment of discomfort, a place where the old Daigo would have collapsed. But the new Daigo stayed. Within weeks, something extraordinary happened. His hesitation disappeared. His fear lost its voice. His mind fell silent. He began waking before his alarm. He trained without thinking about how he felt. He acted without asking permission from his emotions. Tasks that once felt heavy now felt like part of his nature. There was no internal debate, no emotional negotiation, only direction and movement. He wasn't trying to be disciplined. He had become the kind of man who acts without excuses. This was not motivation. This was identity. Daigo realized that discipline was not a skill you pick up and put down. It was a person you become, one action at a time. And the world around him changed too. People began treating him differently. Tasks that once overwhelmed him now dissolved under his momentum. Challenges that once intimidated him became opportunities to grow. The monks noticed his stillness, his presence, his newfound strength. Even silence felt different. Not empty, but full of intention. And for the first time in his life, Daigo felt something he had never felt before. Self-respect. Real, grounded, quiet self-respect. The kind that comes not from results, but from keeping promises to yourself when no one is watching. The mountain had stripped him down. The system had rebuilt him. And Daigo finally understood. A disciplined man is not someone who forces himself to act. A disciplined man is someone who no longer remembers how to be anything else. Chapter 8. The Final Lesson. When Daigo completed his training, Sogen said, "You came seeking discipline, but you found something greater. Responsibility for yourself." Those words settled over Daigo like a warm weight, a truth he had never carried before. Responsibility, not enforced by guilt, not demanded by others, but chosen from within. For the first time, he understood why the monks never called their system discipline training. Because discipline wasn't the point. Identity was. Daigo bowed. His body moved with a quiet strength that had not been there when he first climbed the mountain. His bow was not a gesture of respect alone. It was a symbol of rebirth. "Master, what should I do now?" The question trembled not with fear, but with possibility. The kind of possibility that only appears once a man has removed every excuse he ever hid behind. Sogen smiled gently. It wasn't the smile of a teacher proud of a student. It was the smile of a man who knew that Daigo had stepped into his own life fully and finally. Live like a man who never waits for permission to do what must be done. Those words echoed in the wooden hall, in Daigo's chest, in the space between who he used to be and who he had become. And Daigo walked down the mountain as a man reborn. Not because he eliminated excuses, but because he became someone who no longer needed them. Each step down the stone path felt different, lighter, more intentional, as if the earth itself acknowledged his change. The wind felt sharper, the trees taller, the air fuller. Even the silence felt like a companion, not a weight. Daigo was no longer running from his life. He was walking straight into it. For years he believed discipline was about forcing himself. Now he realized the truth. A man without excuses is a man without limits. The world had not changed. The mountain had not changed. Life had not suddenly become easier. He had changed, and because of that, everything else was now possible. Now it's your turn. Choose one task you've been avoiding. Exercise, studying, cleaning, a project, a dream. Today, not tomorrow, you must perform the immediate act. No delay, no mood, no story, no excuse. Because in this single moment lies the doorway between the person you've always been and the person you are capable of becoming. Most people wait for motivation, but warriors act their way into a new identity. You don't need confidence. You don't need the perfect plan. You only need one thing: movement. Write in the comments, my zero-excuse task today. And if you want more ancient systems to rebuild your identity, subscribe to Discipline Dojo and join the warriors walking this path with you. Your journey starts now, with one action that the old you would have avoided.